Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Fohr's webinars here. So we are going to talk about the recession today. If it exists, if it doesn't, we're not going to talk about that necessarily, but just how it is going to change marketing and influencer marketing in general. I am James. I'm the founder and CEO of Fohr. We are about to come up on our 10th anniversary. So I have been doing this for quite some time. And Grace, who is our strategy VP, has been with me almost the whole time. I think we'll be at maybe 9 years in December, which is a valiant effort to put up with me for 9 consecutive years. If you don't know, we are an ambassador marketing company. And I'm going to just move this slide so that nobody, nobody like twitches out. But we're an ambassador marketing company. For us, what that means is all about doing influencer marketing that feels really authentic, that the audience engages with, and trying to work with influencers that have real love for a brand. We often say, don't spend good money on fake love, right? That we don't want to be paying to have people pretend to like our brands. We want to work with those people that are really passionate and really do love the brand. Today, what we're going to be talking about is, as I said, how are we operating in this potential recessionary environment? If we're going to enter a recession, what is that going to do to the influencer space? And we're obviously, a bit biased. Our advice is probably not going to be spend less money in influencer marketing. We're going to be talking about spending more wisely, about driving value, and just generally about how influencer marketing inherently has value in it. So as we enter this potential recessionary environment, and look, I think we've had $2.5 trillion of wealth erased this year so far. And if you work at a public company, I'm sure you are feeling the kind of strain of that. And there's an increased focus on earnings and costs and spending. And if you are at a private business that is venture funded, obviously, this has been part of the conversation for you, as the private markets have pretty much dried up and nobody is funding businesses right now. So look, it's whether or not we are technically in a recession or not yet, we're already feeling that, right? We're already feeling that budget constraint. And I think that's the first thing you're going to feel is are those budgets being constrained or eliminated? If not, there's definitely going to be more scrutiny on spend, right? Brands are going to want to make sure that the money that they are spending is translating into sales and is being spent effectively, right? There's going to be more focus on ROAS, return on ad spend, and performance marketing, and less experimentation and risk-taking. I don't think that these are all the right things to do necessarily. This is just what happens, right? This is kind of the environment we are going to be entering into. And so as we kind of kick this off, I think we want to start by saying, like, why influencers in general, right? Like, as we enter this kind of constrained space, we know that influencers are really expensive. We know it's very hard to track their impact, because of the way the platforms operate. You can't even obviously put a link into TikTok, so tracking it directly is really difficult. So why should we be thinking about this? Why should we be continuing to invest in this? So this is kind of 3 main points we're going to talk about. One is, how do you future-proof your brand? Where is the inherent value in influencer marketing? And then Grace is going to talk about how can you as marketers unlock more value, right? If you're going to be spending on influencer marketing, which the vast majority of consumer brands in the world are spending on influencer marketing and are increasing that spend, how do you make that money do more for you? How do you get more value out of those dollars? And I think this is the hard thing as marketers, is that we are held to these short-term goals, right? You spent $1 today, how many dollars came back the next day. You know, you're thinking, what's happening this month? What's happening this quarter? Maybe what's happening this year. But you know, as brands and as you know, marketing and communications leaders, we also do need to be thinking about that long-term health. How do we future-proof the brand? How do we make sure that this brand exists in 10 years? What am I doing today to ensure that the success we are experiencing right now, we can build on that in the future? Because it's very likely the things that we do today, we're not going to be doing those in 10 years, right? And so as the world changes, we as marketers and brands generally need to change with it. And so how do we balance that real short-term need to have the money that we're spending driving real value with the longer-term goals of kind of keeping that brand viable? And one thing that we encourage our team to do here at Fohr, and we talk to our clients a lot about, is giving yourself the space to really think much longer term. You know, even go not just a couple of years and what the brand needs to be doing, but thinking 5, 10, 15 years from now. And I think for me, it helps me kind of get out of this this kind of shorter term thinking and build some context and build some you know, some perspective into what we're doing. You know, they just launched an iPhone last week, and you know, I was just thinking, like, 15, 20 years from now, are we all still going to be like seeing what the iPhone 35 has to offer? You know, are we all going to be, you know, is our life going to be centered around an iPhone? Unlikely. It would be almost impossible to imagine a future where 20 years from now, the iPhone is essential to culture and to advertising and to our lives as it is today. You know, same goes for any kind of consumer, like consumer electronic television, right? What do we think in 20 or 30 years that people are going to be sitting around a TV watching television? Unlikely, right? It's unlikely that will happen. I don't think in 20 years websites will really exist anymore. You know, and so that longer term thinking, while it doesn't necessarily help decide what are we doing this week, what are we doing for holiday, which are realistically more important questions to ask for your day-to-day job, it is nice to step back and say, how is the world changing? And what can I do today to invest in that change to make sure I am ready for it? And I think influencers is a big part of that. It is our belief and our vision here at Fohr that influencer marketing is going to be the #1 form of brand communication in the world. That the idea of marketing and advertising is going to be replaced by influencer marketing. And that sounds like just kind of a platitude, but again, if you really think about that and think about your organization and your marketing department and how much time you spend thinking about influencer marketing versus other forms of marketing across the entirety of the organization, I assume influencer marketing is not the dominant thing that you're thinking about and focusing on from a resources perspective, from a people perspective, from an effort perspective. But we really believe in 5, 10, maybe even 5 years, that is going to be the case, right? And so even as we enter recessionary environments, we have to think about if this is going to be the dominant form of advertising, if this is going to be the thing that drives, the future of my brand, that introduces me to new customers, that makes sure I'm re-engaging with older ones. Am I doing enough to invest now in that? I just saw this on Twitter earlier this week, an investor on a dorky VC podcast saying, in the future, all advertising gets replaced by content creation. So this is like basically what we're saying, right? That I don't think the world has fully appreciated how much advertising communications is already changed and how dramatically different the world is going to look in 10 years. And look, we're seeing that in attention, right? Yes, television's, people are still spending more time every day watching their televisions, it's streaming or otherwise, than they are spending on social media. But then if you break that down, you see that actually most of that performance is being driven by the older generation, right? So as these generations age, these things are going to look really different, you know, and 40% of Gen Z preferring TikTok and Instagram over Google search. That is staggering, right? Like, again, let's go back to that future thinking. 15 years from now, is Google as powerful a company as it is today? No, I 100% do not believe that. And it's because search is changing, because behavior is changing. Okay. And so now if, again, as a company, a lot of, you know, your ad spend is focused on lower funnel things like Google search, which is super effective. And if people stop searching Google, you don't get a choice, right, in where you need to invest, right? So like if Google falls out of relevance as a search engine and as a way to discover things, then we need to change with it, right? And this is already happening. This is not a theoretical thing that might happen. This is happening. It's also important to look at, you know, as we think about a potential recession, the sector versus category growth, right? That this is just random numbers that I've made up to make the math easier on myself as I'm talking to y'all. But what I'm trying to show here is that even if overall your brand is lowering budgets, more than likely we're going to be increasing influencer budgets, right? And we're seeing this across a lot of our clients where they're getting pressure from executives to reduce spend, but they're pulling spend away from, you know, categories and line items that again maybe are not contributing to that future proofing, are not something that, you know, 5 years from now is going to be foundational to the success of the brand. And they're pulling it into influencer because not only is it where people are spending their time and it's where attention is and it's more effective. We're going to talk about all of that later, but also it's what we need to learn, right? Organizations are not different than people. Like, we need to learn things, and we learn things by doing them and by failing and by succeeding and by, you know, pulling insights out of that and getting better and better and better every day. And so the money that you spend in 2022 in influencer marketing makes you better at it in 2023. And if I look 5 years from now and say being good at influencer marketing is absolutely foundational to this brand being successful, then I need to make sure I'm learning faster than my competitors, right? And that's why we are seeing brands, even when they're getting pressure on budget, they're increasing the influencer spend. Another thing is what are the, you know, what's the cost of not doing it, right? So I saw this article on Bloomberg about Glossier and about how sales were down in 2021, 26%. Surprising, because makeup beauty was obviously having a really good, well, so skincare was having a great year. And also, if any of y'all on this webinar were in the influencer space in 2015 to 2016, you know, Glossier could miss. Every person you ask, who's the best at influencer marketing? Glossier, they're the best, right? And so I was interested to see that. And so I looked into the Fohr platform and looked at what's going on with their mentions. How many influencers are talking about Glossier? Because I did feel like over the years there was less focus on influencers than out of home and TV ads and other things. And what I found was that from 2019 to 2022, there's a 300% decrease in influencers talking about the brand. And, you know, while I don't obviously work there, and I don't have data on it, you know, directly tying these things to sales, I do think it's not a big jump to look at this and say, okay, this was a place of strength and maybe a place where a brand lost focus on that and it had real impact to sales, right? So not only is there an opportunity cost for, you know, not investing in influencer because of how important it is going to be in the future, but there's that opportunity cost in that, you know, not investing in this now, you know, is going to lead to downstream it being harder to grow your business. Now let's talk about inherent versus hidden value. When I talk about inherent value, it's just it's kind of like, if I'm spending money on influencer and I don't have an enormous level of sophistication, I'm not, deeply strategic about it, what is the value that exists in most influencer work? And then Grace is going to dive into what are the things that you can do to drive more value. Now, first, I think, and most importantly, maybe, is just how foundationally different influencer marketing is as a form of advertising than traditional ads, right? So if we think about a traditional ad almost as a tax on content that you want to consume, right? Be that a football game, a magazine article, reading something online, or even scrolling through your social media feed, right? The traditional ads and media spend interrupt a stream of content that you are interested in, place an ad in there and say, look, this is the toll. We are a bridge troll, and if you want to cross our bridge, you have to watch our advertisement to get to, the fourth quarter of this football game that you're interested in. And so inherently, again, you are putting something in front of me that I'm not necessarily interested in, that I didn't ask for. You're interrupting something that I wanted with something that I don't want. It's a pretty it's a pretty difficult relationship there between the content and the things they want versus the ads. But if we look at influencer again, where the power is and why it is so transformative is obviously those ads are the content. They are the entertainment. There's something people want. People are literally raising their hand, signing up and saying, please advertise to me. I'm desperate. I want to see your ad. And it's being delivered by a person that they trust, a person that they've come to feel like they have a relationship with, a person who they are already taking advice from around products, around restaurants they should be going to, vacations they should be going on, parenting tips, whatever it might be. That's, at its core, I think it's probably not talked about just how transformative that is, right? To go from this place where, as an advertiser, you're taking your ad, you're shoving it in someone's face and being like, pay attention to this, while they're trying to have a conversation with their friend, to they're having a conversation with their friend and that friend says, oh my gosh, oh, you like my eyeliner? Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's just new NARS. It's amazing. You should try it, right? That's a whole different ballgame. And it's a completely different relationship between that ad content and the person consuming it. So just there is an immense amount of value. Obviously, Grace is going to talk more about just kind of how you can leverage this content more broadly, but most brands are repurposing influencer content on their own channels and own social, and the influencer content beats the shit out of the brand content. It's not even close. 400% is the average that we see influencer content performing 400% better than brand content. Because as lovely as your photo shoot is, nobody gives a shit, right? They don't want to see it. They don't care. They want content that is endemic to the platform. They want it to feel real, authentic, and it is obviously just performing much better. So even at the super baseline, if you just use the influencer content on your own organic social, we're not even talking about putting ad spend behind it. That is generally part of every contract. Grace can probably tell me exactly what the timing is, but we generally get, I think it's, at least 6 months of organic social usage included in an influencer fee. If you're not putting that in the contracts, you should consider doing that. Performance much better, bare minimum, you should be using that. Another thing is the content diversity. You're putting together a shoot for a brand. Let's say if you've got one day on set, you probably can't handle more than 3 models. Those productions get pretty expensive. And ultimately, you just don't get a lot of content diversity, right? You've got 3 models. you've got only so many different sets or locations that you can shoot at. And the light doesn't change that much. And the way you're shooting it doesn't change that much. It's one photographer, it's one vision. It needs to be this cohesive story. I love editorials. I used to be a photographer. I love when, brand storytelling through editorial. The problem is on social, like, how many photos can you post of the same person in the same set, in the same location with the same photographer, in the same lighting and the same products? Not that many, right? Like, nobody wants to see 30 photos from your shoot that you're super proud of and is beautiful and professionally shot and all of that, but maybe you can use 5 of those, right? But then take that budget, let's say it's a $50,000 shoot, you take that budget and work with influencers, and you got 15 influencers now. Well, now that's 15 models, that's 15 different photographers, that's 15, at least 15 locations, probably quite a bit more, that's different lighting, right? Like, we can use that content so much more because it's so much more diverse. And remember, it's going to do a lot better anyway, right? And so there's so much value there in just the amount of content. And I know a lot of you who work in influencer also work in social, and I know that you're constantly hurting for content because it is just relentless, the amount of content that you need as a social media professional these days, not to mention all the different platforms and needing to create specifically for those platforms. It's exhausting. So there's a lot of value in working with influencers just in that. Another thing is, it's obviously like working better, right? It's more authentic. Again, there is that place for studio shoots, and they are really important, but again, they just don't make a lot of sense on social. And it's been interesting to see, even with big celebrities, that brands are starting to shoot the celebrities at home, get them to shoot themselves at home, right? And thinking like, where are these assets going, and what is the vibe, and what do I need to capture to make it successful? And I think we're starting to see that shift of brands understanding, even if they are producing the content and they are shooting it, how do I make it look like influencer content, right? How many commercials have we seen recently of like, that look like an influencer, and they're like, hey everyone, like, it looks like they're holding a phone, but like, it's actually a commercial that was like shot and probably cost like $300,000. It's actually kind of a confusing trend that I don't totally understand, but it's interesting again to see that, like, how much more this is connecting with people, how much more effective it is, and brands trying to replicate that. Okay, so that is, I think, what is inherently valuable about most of the influencer work that you do, and why as a brand it's really important to be investing in these channels that are going to future-proof your brand and set you up for success, not just this year, but in future years. I'm going to kick it to Grace, who is going to dive more deeply into what can you do tomorrow to drive more value out of your partners and to make sure the influencer marketing you do is more effective. So Grace, welcome, and take it away. Oh, I'm driving, so I'll make sure I stay on top of it.
Okay, great, perfect. I'll give you a little point if we need a slide change here. So hi everyone, if I haven't met you before, my name's Grace Murray, pronouns for she, her. I'm VP of strategy here at Fohr. And as James said, I've been here for a long time. I've been here for coming up on 9 years, which is kind of wild. I'll start thinking about what my 10-year anniversary present can be. But with having been here for so long and thinking about how you can drive more value, I do think it's important to kind of step back and think about where the industry was versus where we are now and where it's going. So if we can go to the next slide. I think this is the fundamental kind of flip that we've been experiencing over the last couple of years that we were anticipating, but was in some ways expedited by COVID and by nature, brands not being able to produce the content in ways that they were used to being able to do. So, looking back, and when I first started in the industry, influencers were purely seen as this amplifier of the kind of the real branding, the real advertising, and there would be a experimental line item for influencers, but it would ultimately be to take brand messages, key messages, and creative and try to amplify that type of work. Whereas now, and looking ahead, it's really flipped. James just referenced that there's this trend toward like a HelloFresh with a fake influencer being like, hey, everyone, I'm so excited to kind of eat my meal at home. But it's a TV ad and it's not a real influencer. So it's gotten to this crazy flip pretty quickly where now influencer content is that central piece that's then being distributed out into other channels, which has pretty significant impacts as we think about how we drive value and also how we think about value of the influencer content and how we fund it internally. So if we go to the next slide, again, from my own personal experience, this was the most extreme version I could think of to illustrate this. So on the left, we have a screenshot from the archives of my inbox, which is from way back when, someone reaching out to see if we could set up an influencer campaign to amplify our upcoming Super Bowl commercial featuring none other than Michael Bublé. So, this type of brief was really common for us of like, hey, we have this really exciting brand advertising moment and we've heard that influencers are important. Can they please amplify that? Whereas now, and looking ahead, TikTok are getting the creative, are developing their TVC creative based on what audiences are asking from them on TikTok. So the kind of campaigns for these more traditional forms of advertising or other media channels are starting on social, starting with influencers, and everything's flowing out from there. So we can go to the next slide. So with this in mind, it does mean that now influencer content is being really utilized across the board. So James touched on using it and leveraging it within social media accounts. There's also increasingly asks consistently and growing asks of the influencer teams to be supporting, the creative of paid ads, of whitelisting, Facebook ads, Instagram ads. Website content is pivoting in toward influencers rather than brand produced content. Email marketing, so there's now email teams asking for this content too. And even over to outdoor signage, this content's being utilized everywhere. So I think as we first think about value, it's important to think about the value that the influencer content can be bringing cross-departmentally to make sure that we're really just thinking about it in the right frame of mind and the right approach as we move forward. So we can go to the next slide. So ultimately, this represents, we've been talking a lot about this shift between from brand creation to brand curation. There's a lot of kind of hesitation from a lot of brands about the fact that this is a reality and this is the way that things are going. And that's natural because, obviously means that there is a little bit less control. There's probably nerves around, I can just see that you can't hear me. Is anyone else encountering this problem? I'm unsure. Let's see. We can hear you? Okay, great. Well, I'm sorry about that, Chris Parnell. I hope you can hear me soon. So this shift from brand creation to curation doesn't mean that it's just a complete free-for-all. It just means that we really need to be rethinking about how brands are built and how they're sustained. We pulled this was from a press article this week. We don't care if it's good or bad. Brands updating their user-generated content strategies to stretch marketing dollars. So because of the sheer volume of content that's needed, again, lots of brands are pivoting into getting it from users, getting it from influencers, and trying to curate it from influencers to give the feeling of user-generated content rather than producing it themselves. If we go to the next slide. I think the good news is it's not bad. There's obviously a lot of lo-fi content out there that is performing really well. It also is possible to swing things into a much more kind of high-touch, high-end type of content or style of content if that's the need for your brand. And again, probably will still deliver better results. So some quick examples here. In top left, we have Marques Brownlee, one of the biggest most notable tech YouTubers in the world, on Best Buy's homepage, which was completely, his pics were there. It drove incredible website click-throughs and traffic. Below, we have John Hardy, who leveraged influencers to be the creative directors for their actual lookbooks. So this was coming to life, we can see here on their website, but it was also leveraged across all of their channels in print, e-com, social, the works. We can see some of our Madewell ambassadors integrated into ecom and .com. They're scrolling through. And on the right, one of our funnest, most extreme examples is one of our Sephora squad members being featured on a billboard in out of home on Times Square. So there's such incredible ways that brands are leveraging this content. Again, whether it's just reposting a quick post or if it's actually kind of recentering influencer into being the center of their strategy versus that amplifier. So if we go to the next. So I think this shift, it has happened really quickly. Again, I've been in the space for 9 years and I spent the first 5 convincing brands why they should invest in influencers and what an influencer was and how you work with them and why it's not just annoying and, you know, why I understand that it's annoying that they don't write back sometimes and that it seems expensive, but like it is going somewhere. So the first kind of, only in the last couple of years has this big swing into like, oh, wow, this does work. This is important. This is also a way of us reaching audiences and creating content that's more impactful than a lot of our other advertising. That's happened really quickly. And I think what we are hearing from a lot of our brands and a lot of our clients is that it feels like all of a sudden they're being pulled into a million different directions from different departments who are really, it's like this kind of deluge of requests. A lot of the time there isn't that education about the nuance of the space or what is complicated about it, and that it isn't just as simple as like getting an influencer for this thing really quickly. So cross-team communication has become really challenging for any influencer team internally or influencer specialist. Part of that is expanding and changing KPIs. So, you know, in one way, there's, as we've just seen and as we've been evangelizing here, there's so many use cases for influencer content, and you can kill 2 birds with one stone, so to speak, to be able to make sure you're getting as much value from that content as is possible. But in order to, and it's a terrible expression, but in order to kill those 2 birds effectively, you need to know first what they are. And what we're hearing from a lot of our clients is, again, that goals or objectives or ways that the content is going to be utilized are being thrown in at them midway through their campaign, when it might already be too late. We might have already selected the wrong type of influencer for these now 5 birds that we're trying to kill. So that's a key challenge and a new pain point. And then budget strain. So, you know, social managers are needing more content. E-com and emailer teams are needing that content. Then, oh, can we get a quick influencer to go to this event? Can we do this? Can we do that? It's creating a scenario where the usage terms of individuals' agreements are expanding and lengthening, which can make things more expensive. And again, for the contacts on our on influencer teams in-house, it's creating a scenario where they're the ones having to navigate like, okay, I now have all of these needs from all of these other teams. Why is it that my budget is maybe being stretched? Because now I need to, like, you know, influencer rates are bundled. So it's not as if I'm saying, okay, well, you know, how much is, it's essentially saying, all right, we need 6 months of usage for this team, but I don't actually need that as part of my strategy. So I think starting to have those conversations internally is a big thing that we want to be able to equip you all with today, because again, these are the conversations that we're having with so many of our clients. So we can go to the next slide. So how do you navigate it? Lots of new pain points, while also juggling this increase in scrutiny, this tougher financial environment. So how do you kind of juggle both of those things? So the first is educating yourself first, your peers and your leaders about the factors impacting rates. So we have a whole webinar on this that is, you know, another 40 to 60 minutes. It's available on our YouTube, or we'd be more than happy to have a session with your teams to talk about this. With this increase in demand in the last couple of years for influencers, there's an incredible amount of new professionals who are in the space. and it's already a really, really, really messy pricing environment. So it's super important to be able to have a quick resource like this. We're going to be emailing out this deck after the webinar, but you're also welcome to screenshot it, of course. These are the key factors that we see impacting pricing. And so it's first super important to have your own knowledge of what these factors are, so you can start to push back if you're being pulled into a million different directions, or if there's something that's incorporated or that's being asked of you that seems like it's not going to impact cost, but maybe actually it does. To pull a couple of examples here, production time. Maybe for you and your strategy as the influencer lead, you just need a quick selfie, a quick little easy post. Someone from your paid team might have a 10-page briefing doc on what they need the deliverable asset to look like. And therefore, when you're going to negotiate with that influencer, they might be charging you more because their need is different to yours. So having a good sense of all of these different factors, and again, there's a whole, I'm not going to drain this slide because we have a whole 60 on it, but really, really important to start here. So we can go to the next slide. So coming out of that, the second is to reduce usage waste and share the burden of budget impacts. So again, we are very much encouraging the best way to get value out of your influencer content is to think about how the brand as a whole can be benefiting from that influencer content across channels in different ways. But that doesn't mean that the way to get that done is to just ask for the most extensive usage rights you possibly can in order to make that happen. Because the biggest waste that we see in terms of budgets is just defaulting to long usage terms because it kind of makes things easier, or maybe that's just the language in your contracts. But that's a key thing that influencers are using to drive up their costs because they feel that you're going to use that usage. They're charging with the mindset of anticipating they're going to be on your website or they're going to be in your emailer. So if you want them there and you've already aligned with the other team there, great, get that usage. If it's not going to be used, why pay for it if you're not going to use it? So just figure out which way you're going to go. So here's another kind of screenshotable reference for you, but again, we'll be sending this out after the deck. So there's two different examples here. One on the left is prepping for a budget share in 2023. So if your influencer budget is limited, but again, you're being asked for all of these different things from different departments, which is increasing your usage in a way that you might not even know. This is an email to kind of prep your teams for, hey, so excited to hear that influencer content is going to be utilized in this way. It represents, a really great thing. We're so glad that you're loving it. We want to make sure that we're spending effectively. Usage rates do impact pricing. So I'd love to set up some time for us to plan for next year to chat about some budget allocation from your team and to understand your objectives to make sure that we're delivering content that needs them. So that's the one on the left to basically say like, hey, if I'm the influencer lead and I'm the one managing this dynamic and briefing these influencers, the people from other teams might be thinking it's a quick, repurpose, but sometimes it's not. So having that prep and setting the stage for the potential that they could be, pushing for some of that budget internally to utilize it. The one on the right is aligning that we can shorten it. So James referenced before that the default in the industry has always been that 6 months. And again, if your team is leveraging it for 6 months, keep it. But if they're not, and if you're seeing, especially on social where, if there's generally an element of seasonality to a post, if we're doing an influencer campaign right now, usually the social team is reposting it within a month. And again, a year ago, influencers weren't as mindful of how usage should impact their costs, but education has increased. So they are now using that in their negotiation. So if you don't need it, trim it. So the one on the right is reaching out to your social team to basically say, hey, do you actually need this usage? If not, are you aligned that we can repost within a month, and we'll bring it back to make sure that we can stretch our dollars as far as possible, because I know we're all under increased budget pressure. So two little templates for you there. We can go to the next one. So number 3 is something we talk about a lot. And again, there's a full webinar on this very topic. And our wonderful Sophie Wood actually did a guest appearance on Negronis with Nord, our weekly weekly YouTube show about the concept of what we call invisible influence. So here we're saying so check those out first of all, but think about invisible influence, because demand we just looked at those factors that impact pricing. Demand is the number one factor in any market that is going to impact pricing. So, whether it be cars, houses, influencers, if there's a high demand for a specific thing, the price goes up. And if there are influencers where, for whatever reason, they are, if it's their content quality, they just seem more kind of commercially viable generally, they might have a strong engagement rate, they might have, those kind of above the surface metrics that everyone can see. Those folks are probably going to be quite in demand, which means generally they're probably going to be more expensive. So important to understand invisible influence and how we think about it. So this is a little snapshot of some of the data that we have available at Fohr that we use to help make our selections. So a couple of those we have up top, achieved impressions or average reach. So, if someone has 100,000 followers in general, on Instagram, they might reach 15% of them, but there are people who are reaching 30%, 40%, 50%. And so to be able to identify by that percentage number is an incredible unlock, because it means that ultimately you could be, not everyone has access to that type of information, so the demand might be a little bit lower, and it will help unearth some people that might be off your radar. The next is a forgotten one that it feels like the whole industry has just walked away from, because there's a narrative out there that blogs are dead. It feels really old school, and I feel like I'm showing my millennial colors here. But if link clicks and or sales conversion are an objective for you, and I know they are for most brands right now, given the pressure on budgets, blog traffic is an incredible place to look. On average, blog traffic has fallen. There's been a move away from blogs as a way of working with influencers. But for the people who have been able to maintain that blog traffic, even in an environment where it's kind of pushing against a tide, that shows an incredible ability to keep their audience incredibly engaged and to move them to action. A lot of those blogs function more like they're very, very product focused. They have whole blog posts that are just, hey, go check out this product, go check out this product. So to be able to search by Google Analytics to source those people, which is available on Fohr, is a really, really incredible way to look. And the next is follower growth rate. So again, not everyone has access to this, but this is an area that we love to look at when we are looking for long-term partners, because if we're locking someone in for a 3, 6, 9, 12-month contract, and we can see the growth trend, to be able to catch them on at the start of that or midway, and to be able to know that we're going to benefit from that growth over time is a really, really incredible way to drive value. Go to the next. So just reference long-term contracts, which we have always been a huge proponent of, and continue to be. But we also are talking to some of our clients about when and where it makes sense to keep that full 12 months, especially in, we'll get into it in the next slide. We're talking a lot about when and where it makes sense to do a 12-month versus when it makes sense to do quarterly, and kind of lean into that approach. So we'll go to the next slide. So we've got a bit of a side-by-side here on the benefits of the benefits and drawbacks. There's really not any huge downsides to shortening the contracts, other than it can increase the actual level of effort to produce these programs. It can mean that your team are doing more reviews and that you're doing more optimizations, either directly or with a partner like Fohr. But it does mean that you can really test things out. It means that you can communicate to influencer partners that you are really excited to work with them. You can be really clear about how you're measuring success with them, and you can let them know, and only let them know this if this is true, but you can let them know that you are planning to engage partners who are great partners, who are top performers, and who are going to deliver for you. So a lot that can be done here in terms of just also giving the influencers what they need in order to perform or to overperform, because there's so little information that's typically shared with influencers to set them up for success or to over deliver. Okay, and number 5, we have insist on cross-departmental shared results to protect your budgets and grow your budgets. So this is a huge one, and one that has been pretty impossible, as the industry has gone on, because things have been so siloed. And again, because influencers have been seen as like, the cute experimental budget line item that's often handled by a younger employee who, they get influencers because they're young and they understand social. So there hasn't been a dynamic for a lot of brands where the influencer team is seen as more of like one of the lead teams who need to be given information and insights from other teams in order to inform future work. Because again, if we're getting scrappy requests from other teams saying, hey, can I get some influencer content for this? Hey, can I get it for this? Hey, can I get it for this? It's like, hey, sure, if we have it and if we have rights to it. But if those asks are increasing, we need to understand what it's doing for you. So I can ask for more budget to be able to get you more of that thing and to be able to have it charged toward your goals. And again, whether this is happening internally or whether you're working with a partner like Fohr, to be able to get the insights from those other teams and to start to incorporate them into your own reporting and your own building out of your strategy is going to shift how much money you think you need, how you're planning, the types of cross-functional conversations that you're having. This flip has a really big impact, and you do need to think about how those impacts and how those increasing asks are impacting your ability to deliver. So if we go to the next slide, why another piece of this, again, James referenced at the start, frustratingly, influencer can still be difficult. We do run conversion based campaigns, but the frustrating thing about it is that it just doesn't tell the whole story. We can show those sales numbers and say, hey, here's the bottom line, here's what was trackable. But often there's so much benefit that other departments are getting, or that's being attributed in other ways to other media forms. But ultimately, influencer is having an impact. So it's really important to understand how and where those impacts are falling into place to be able to inform, how you're planning and how you're reporting and how you're reporting value. So we can go to the next slide. So we've got a couple of little snapshots here of things to think about, potential language to use, the types of information that you might want to get, and we can talk through a couple of them. So the first is with your social team, and asking them for a little bit of forecasting on how much content they anticipate they're going to be needing across channels, as well as any insights on how influencer content or creator-based content is performing in comparison to brand content. So this is something that even at Fohr, a year ago, we weren't including in our recap reports with our clients. We weren't, saying, oh, let's jump over onto social and see if they reposted it and how it performed. But more recently, we've started doing that, and every time it's outperforming drastically the brand produced content. So to be able to diplomatically request that from your social team, so it's not even necessarily on the influencer team, to be able to say, hey, this value of this content is existing on other teams as well. So asking for that. Paid media team, requesting comparative insights between brand produced content and influencer content, as well as any common threads or trends in the content that's performing well versus not. So we have a partnership with a company called Sunday. When we run paid media for our brands, we have a dashboard to see which content is performing well versus which isn't. And it's so fun to be able to have that access and to be able to jump in and see, like, oh, okay, out of these 20 ads that we're running, the 3 that are top performing are referencing the skepticism that they had for this type of a product, but now they've tried this one and they love it. So that's a message that we can start to, be able to reverse engineer with our influencer partners and to build as part of our strategy. So getting those types of insights or that type of access to information, whether it be directly or for your agency or partner, is super, super important. And same for e-com. So and email, getting insights on click-through rates, getting any insights on how and where and how long this content performed. And if there's any comparative data to brand produced assets, to be able to push for a reframing on how influencer content is being valued and how success is being measured. And we are here to help. So I said before that there are an enormous amount of new people in the space. We can go to the next slide. This increase in desire for influencer content also is a huge opportunity for people who work in influencer marketing to, move through the ranks as a more respected form of marketing and something that all other teams are now becoming reliant on. So it's a big opportunity, but you do need support and partnerships. So whether it's working with us directly or attending things like this, we have a lot of education materials that are publicly available. This is just a snapshot there on our blog. Emailers, we have monthly webinars generally, we have a weekly YouTube channel. We also love doing lunch and learns. We love being connected with your brands in those ways. We like doing custom sessions. So from an education place, again, influencer departments are being moved around so consistently and being thrown on different plates that we're more than happy to be that partner to help you. We can go to the next slide. We also run end-to-end. We have self-serve technology to help you run these things directly. We have end-to-end campaign management. And so we would love to be able to support in that way as well. And I believe we now have time for a little bit of Q&A. So James, if you'd like to join me.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thank you all for sticking that out. 56 minutes of Grace and I unloading our brains on you. There's a couple questions here that I just want to get to quickly. If you have any more, drop them in Q&A quick. I know we only have a few minutes left. One is thoughts on the impact of sponsored ads taking over IG. Will TikTok be following the same revenue stream at some points? Definitely a lot more ads on Instagram right now. Obviously, the Meta stock prices is under some pressure, and Facebook advertising is not working as well. So I think they are spiraling a little bit and maybe are jeopardizing the experience a bit. I don't see any reason TikTok wouldn't do that. I do think that something that we are tracking and that is interesting is just how TikTok with the algorithm and the For You page and Instagram kind of following that model of putting content into your feed that you're not following. There is this kind of feeling that you're following the algorithm, and that actually TikTok's not really a social network as much as it is kind of an entertainment channel, and that paid ads ultimately will play a bigger part in that. Both Instagram and TikTok, influencer marketing is probably too complex for them to get really involved in. So ultimately they need to sell paid ads. So do I think a lot more paid ads will show up into TikTok as that platform matures? Absolutely. That will 100% happen. With the rise of influencers, has this caused more traditional influencers to be viewed or interacted similarly to traditional ads? I think a bit. We're seeing certainly as the budgets increase, there's added scrutiny around it. We have brands trying to kind of treat influencers as media, which doesn't really totally work. I think that, I'm sure those of you who have been in the industry for quite some time can be frustrated with people who are newer to it coming in and telling you how to do it and how advertising works. And you're like, wait, but that's not really how the influencer space works. So we are in a period of kind of flex and change right now, and super excited to see, where it all ends up. but definitely starting to view this more as traditional advertising. And I think that, for us, as we said, we think that this is going to be the dominant form of advertising here over the next decade. So thank you all so much for coming and spending the time with us. As we said, we'll send this deck around, and we are always here for any questions that you might have. Happy to talk to your companies and do a kind of lunch and learn session if that's interesting. And we will hopefully see you soon. All right. Cheers, everyone.